Millionaire CEO sees a homeless woman with twin girls. He remembers the woman he abandoned 10 years ago. Let me be their father. I'll give you my entire salary. Before we dive in, whether you're having your morning coffee or winding down for the night, you're exactly where you need to be. The autumn wind cut through Maxwell Harrington's tailored Armani suit as he stepped out of his gleaming black Bentley. At 41, he had everything money could buy. CEO of Harrington Enterprises, Wall Street darling, and one of Boston's most eligible bachelors, yet the emptiness inside him grew with each passing year. "Conference call at 2, sir," his driver reminded him. "I'll be there," Maxwell replied, glancing at his Patek Philippe watch. The financial district bustled with purpose, much like Maxwell himself. He'd built his empire from nothing, sacrificing everything for success. That thought always brought a bitter taste, not everything, but someone. Someone he tried desperately to forget. The memory of Charlotte slipped through his defenses occasionally, especially during autumn. 10 years ago, he'd made his choice. The company over her. She'd been pregnant, begging him to choose their family. He'd walked away. As he approached his building, something caught his eye across the street. A woman with a weathered cardboard sign sat on a bench. 2 small girls huddled beside her. Something about her posture, the way she held her head despite obvious hardship, struck a chord of recognition. Maxwell stopped cold. Those eyes. He'd know them anywhere despite the hollowness that now shadowed them. Charlotte. 10 years had carved deep lines into her once youthful face. Her golden hair was dull, pulled back in a practical ponytail. The designer clothes she once wore, replaced by layers of worn garments. But it was the children that shattered his carefully constructed world. Twin girls, around 9 years old, with his mother's distinctive auburn hair and, even from this distance, his own piercing blue eyes. His daughters. The realization hit him with physical force. He had daughters. Charlotte had carried through with the pregnancy. While he'd been building his empire, she'd been raising his children, alone, and now apparently homeless. Maxwell's phone buzzed. The conference call. Billions in potential investments. The deal he'd worked months to secure. He silenced the phone without looking at it. The smaller of the twins looked up, catching his stare. For a breathtaking moment, he saw himself reflected in her curious gaze. She tugged her mother's sleeve. Charlotte looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded street. Recognition dawned. Her face transformed. Shock, disbelief, then a hardening he felt like a physical blow. She gathered the girls closer, protective. Without conscious decision, Maxwell crossed the street, weaving through honking taxis and business people. His heart hammered against his ribs like it might escape. "Charlotte," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. Maxwell. Her voice was rougher than he remembered, but still unmistakably hers. What a surprise! The twins stared up at him with identical expressions of curiosity. "Are they?" He couldn't finish. "Yes. No elaboration, no softening. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." The simple truth in her words stung worse than any accusation. The smaller girl spoke up. "Mom, who's this man?" Maxwell felt the world tilt on its axis. "No one important, Emma," Charlotte replied, but her eyes never left his face. "Charlotte, please." Maxwell found himself saying, "Let me help you. Let me be part of their lives." Her laugh was hollow. "Now, after 10 years, I'll give you anything," he heard himself say, the desperation in his voice unfamiliar. "My salary, a home, everything. Just let me be their father." Charlotte's eyes narrowed. "You can't buy your way into their lives, Maxwell." "Mom, we're hungry," the other twin whispered. Maxwell watched Charlotte's face crumple with a mother's agony of not being able to provide. "Please," he said softly, "just coffee, a meal. We can talk." The light changed. Time to cross or retreat. Charlotte stood, gathering their meager belongings. One meal, no promises. Maxwell nodded, afraid to speak, afraid to break this fragile moment. As they crossed the street together, his phone buzzed again. The conference call, his empire calling. He turned off his phone completely. Charlotte sat rigidly across from Maxwell in the upscale restaurant, her eyes darting nervously around the elegant space. The twins, Emma and Olivia, gaped wide-eyed at crystal chandeliers and plush surroundings. "Order anything you want," Maxwell told them, his voice gentle. "Really? Anything?" Emma asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. Maxwell nodded, a smile tugging at his lips despite the tension. "Absolutely anything." Charlotte's face remained impassive. "Girls, find something sensible." The waiter approached with practiced deference, barely concealing his judgment at Charlotte's appearance. Maxwell caught the look, and his jaw tightened. "My guests will have the finest service," he said quietly, with the steely undertone that made boardroom opponents crumble. The waiter's demeanor transformed instantly. "Of course, Mr. Harrington." After ordering, an uncomfortable silence descended. The twins, oblivious to adult tensions, colored on the children's menus provided. "They're beautiful," Maxwell said finally. "Yes," Charlotte agreed, softening slightly as she looked at her daughters. "They are." "How did—" Maxwell began. "How did we end up on the street?" Charlotte finished sharply. "Is that what you're asking?" He nodded, accepting her anger as his due. "I managed for years," she said, keeping her voice low. "Had a decent job as an administrative assistant. But when Olivia got sick last year, leukemia, everything fell apart." Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face. "Leukemia? She's in remission now," Charlotte said quickly, noticing his expression. "But the medical bills—" "Even with insurance, it was too much. I missed work for her treatments, lost my job, then our apartment." Maxwell struggled to process this information. One of his daughters had fought cancer, while he'd been completely unaware of her existence. "3 months on the street," Charlotte continued, her voice clinical, detached. "Shelter beds are limited. We usually get turned away. The food arrived, steaks for the adults, chicken fingers, and milkshakes for the twins. The girls' eyes widened at the portions. "Wow, look, Mom!" Olivia exclaimed. Charlotte's mask slipped, revealing naked relief at seeing her daughters eat properly. Maxwell felt something twist inside him. "Charlotte, I meant what I said," he ventured carefully. "I want to help, not just today." "Why?" she challenged. "Guilt, some midlife crisis. They're my daughters." "Biologically, yes." Her eyes flashed. "But you weren't there for the midnight feedings, the first steps, the nightmares, the chicken pox, the school plays." "I didn't know they existed," he interrupted. "Would it have changed anything if you did?" she asked, the question hanging between them. 10 years ago, Maxwell had been consumed with ambition. Charlotte's pregnancy had seemed like an obstacle to his ascent. Would knowing about twin daughters have changed his calculus? He wasn't sure, and his hesitation answered her question. "That's what I thought," she said quietly. "I'm not the same man I was then," he insisted. "Neither am I that same woman." The twins finished their meals with the efficiency of children who'd learned not to waste food. Emma looked up at Maxwell with curiosity. "Are you rich?" she asked bluntly. "Emma!" Charlotte scolded. Maxwell smiled. "I have been fortunate in business." "Do you have a big house?" Olivia chimed in. "I do," he admitted. "Too big, actually. Just me rattling around in it." "We used to have an apartment," Emma offered, "with a pink bathroom." Maxwell saw Charlotte's eyes grow shiny with unshed tears. "I have a proposition," he said, seizing the moment. "I have a guest house on my property, 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. It's sitting empty. Stay there while you get back on your feet." Charlotte stiffened. "No." "Mom, please," Olivia said, hearing the offer. "A real house." It's not charity, Maxwell pressed. It's restitution, and a chance for me to know my daughters. They don't know you're their father, Charlotte whispered fiercely. I've never told them. The words struck like physical blows. Of course she hadn't. What would she have said? I understand, he said, though it hurt more than he expected. I'm just offering safe housing. Nothing more unless you decide otherwise. Charlotte looked at her daughters, their hopeful faces, their too thin frames. He saw the internal struggle play across her features. 1 week, she finally conceded. Then we'll re-evaluate. Relief flooded through him. It was a start, a small opening. As they prepared to leave, his phone, now turned back on, exploded with notifications. Missed calls, urgent texts. Maxwell ignored them all. This is where we're staying. Emma's voice rose in disbelief as Maxwell's car approached the guest house. Though modest compared to the main mansion visible through the trees, the stone cottage, with its slate roof and climbing roses, would have graced the cover of Architectural Digest. It's like a fairy tale house, Olivia whispered, pressing her nose against the car window. Charlotte remained silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Maxwell could read the warring emotions on her face, relief for her daughters, pride struggling against necessity, lingering anger toward him. They pulled up to the cottage. I had my housekeeper prepare everything, Maxwell explained, helping unload their meager belongings, 3 worn backpacks containing everything they owned. Inside, Charlotte visibly faltered at the understated luxury, plush sofas, gleaming hardwood floors, a kitchen stocked with food. The twins ran from room to room, squealing with delight at discoveries, soft beds with fluffy comforters, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, bookshelves filled with children's classics. I didn't know what they might like, Maxwell said awkwardly. I can get different things if... It's fine, Charlotte cut him off. More than fine. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. I should let you settle in, he finally said, placing a card on the counter. My numbers, cell, office, home, call for anything at all. Charlotte nodded stiffly. As he turned to leave, Olivia appeared in the hallway. Are you coming back tomorrow? The innocent question hung in the air. Maxwell looked to Charlotte, deferring to her. Would you like me to? He asked carefully. Olivia nodded. You could see my drawings. I'm really good at horses. I'd like that very much, he replied, his throat tight with unexpected emotion. After school, Charlotte interjected. Maxwell blinked. School? They're not enrolled right now, but they will be, Charlotte said firmly. Education comes first. Of course, he agreed quickly. I'll have my assistant arrange everything tomorrow. The local elementary is excellent. I can handle it, Charlotte insisted. I'm sure you can, he acknowledged, but the administration there can be particular. My family has made donations. It would simplify things. What he didn't say, the school would waive any documentation issues, expedite enrollment, make allowances that might otherwise be impossible. His name carried weight. Charlotte seemed to understand the unspoken. After a moment she nodded grudgingly. Tomorrow then, Maxwell said, backing toward the door. Good night. Outside, alone in the gathering darkness, Maxwell leaned against his car, emotions crashing through him like storm waves. Daughters. He had daughters. Beautiful, bright, resilient little girls who had faced hardships he couldn't imagine while he'd been amassing wealth he rarely enjoyed. His phone buzzed. Richard Sanders, his CFO and oldest friend. Where the hell have you been? Richard demanded when he answered. You missed the Westlake call. They're threatening to pull out. Something came up, Maxwell said distantly. Something more important than $5 billion? Maxwell looked back at the cottage, where warm light now glowed from the windows. Yes, he said simply, much more important. Silence then. Are you sick? Dying? What's going on, Max? I found Charlotte. A longer silence. Richard was one of the few who knew about Charlotte, about Maxwell's choice a decade ago. "And?" Richard finally asked, his tone cautious. "And I have twin daughters. Jesus Christ, now 9 years old, one already survived cancer." "Max?" Richard's voice held warning. "Tread carefully. This could be—" "Not a scam," Maxwell interrupted. "They're mine. One look at them and there's no question. What do they want?" "Nothing. Charlotte didn't even want to see me. They were homeless, Richard. My children were sleeping on the street." Another silence. "Where are they now?" "The guest house." "You moved homeless people into your guest house? Have you lost your mind?" "They're not homeless people," Maxwell snapped. "They're my family." The word surprised him as it left his mouth. Family. He hadn't had real family since his parents died. "The board meeting tomorrow," Richard began. "Reschedule it." "You can't just—" "I can and I will," Maxwell said with finality. "For 10 years I've put this company first. For once, I'm putting something else first." He ended the call and stared up at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow he would begin making amends for a decade of absence. Tomorrow he would start the journey of becoming the father his daughters deserved, even if it cost him everything else. Morning sunlight streamed through the cottage windows as Charlotte sipped coffee at the kitchen island, still disoriented by their sudden change in circumstances. 24 hours ago, she'd been contemplating which shelter to try next. Now her daughters slept in proper beds, their bellies full for the first time in months. All because of Maxwell Harrington, the man who'd broken her heart and abandoned her when she needed him most. The sound of tires on gravel pulled her from her thoughts. Through the window, she watched a sleek black SUV approach. Maxwell emerged in another impeccable suit, carrying what appeared to be shopping bags. Charlotte's pride bristled. She hadn't asked for charity, a knock at the door. She considered not answering, but the twins would be awake soon. "Good morning," Maxwell said when she opened the door, his smile tentative. "I hope I'm not too early." "We've been up since dawn," Charlotte replied. "Hard to break the habit when you're usually chased out of doorways by shopkeepers." His face fell at the reminder, and Charlotte felt a twinge of guilt for the deliberate barb. She stepped back, allowing him entry. "I brought some things for the girls," he said, setting down the bags. "School supplies, clothes." "Nothing extravagant," he added hastily, seeing her expression. "Just basics. We don't need—" "Mom?" Emma's voice interrupted from the hallway. She stood in penguin-patterned pajamas found in the dresser, hair tousled from sleep. "Is that Maxwell?" "Good morning, Emma," he greeted her warmly. "Did you bring presents?" she asked, eyeing the bags. "Emma," Charlotte admonished. Maxwell laughed. "Just some things you might need for school. My assistant enrolled you both for tomorrow. They're expecting you." "Real school?" Emma's eyes widened. "Livy, wake up! We're going to real school." She raced back to their bedroom. Charlotte heard excited whispers. Then both girls appeared, Olivia still rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Do we get backpacks?" Olivia asked hesitantly. "The nice kind with wheels." "Let's see what's in the bags," Maxwell suggested, his expression carefully neutral, though Charlotte caught the emotion he tried to hide. The twins fell upon the shopping bags with the enthusiasm of children who'd had precious little to call their own. Charlotte watched Maxwell watching them, saw the wonder and pain mingling in his eyes as he witnessed this simple joy. "Thank you," she said quietly, meaning it despite her reservations. "It's nothing," he replied, equally soft. "It's everything to them." The twins discovered the rolling backpacks, one purple, one teal, and squealed with delight. Maxwell had included everything: pencil cases, notebooks, lunchboxes, water bottles, and clothes. Practical, good quality, in the right sizes. "How did you know their sizes?" Charlotte asked. "I guessed," he admitted. "And the sales associate helped." "You went shopping yourself? Not your assistant?" He met her eyes. "Some things you don't delegate." Something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. There's something else, Maxwell said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. A bank card. I've set up an account in your name. Charlotte stiffened. No. Charlotte, be reasonable. I need my independence, she hissed, mindful of the girls now trying on their new clothes. I need to stand on my own feet. And you will, he assured her. But right now, you need resources to get there. Consider it back child support if it helps your pride. The words hung between them, sharp-edged and dangerous. You don't get to claim that role, Charlotte said, her voice low and fierce. Not after 10 years. I'm not claiming anything, he replied evenly. I'm acknowledging my responsibility. Charlotte felt tears, threatening, and hated herself for the weakness. You have no idea what we've been through. Then tell me, he urged. Help me understand. Before she could respond, Emma appeared in a new outfit, twirling for their approval. Do I look pretty? Beautiful, Maxwell said, with such genuine admiration that Charlotte's anger faltered. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. A tall, distinguished man in his early 40s stood outside, his expression somewhere between curious and suspicious. Richard, Maxwell said, surprise evident. What are you doing here? Making sure you haven't completely lost your mind, the man replied, his eyes taking in the domestic scene with undisguised skepticism. The board is waiting, Max. You can't just disappear. I told you to reschedule, and I did, for an hour from now. Richard's gaze shifted to Charlotte, then the twins. So these are my daughters, Maxwell confirmed, a note of warning in his voice. Emma and Olivia. Charlotte watched Richard's face, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes, a potential threat to Maxwell's carefully built world. Ladies, Richard acknowledged with a tight smile. Max, we need to talk, privately. Later, Maxwell replied firmly. I'm busy now. Richard's jaw tightened. The Westlake deal will wait. An unspoken battle of wills passed between the men. Finally, Richard nodded curtly. 1 hour, Max, not a minute more. After he'd gone, Charlotte studied Maxwell's profile. Your world is calling. He turned to her, something resolute in his expression. Let it call. I've missed too much already. For the first time since seeing him again, Charlotte allowed herself to consider that perhaps Maxwell Harrington had indeed changed. She just wasn't sure if it was enough, or if it was too late. Mr. Harrington, the board is getting restless. Catherine Davis, Maxwell's executive assistant, whispered as she placed another stack of documents before him. The boardroom hummed with tension. Maxwell had arrived 40 minutes late to a meeting he'd originally tried to cancel entirely. Now, as the Westlake presentation droned on, his mind kept drifting back to the cottage, to Charlotte and the twins. Mr. Harrington? The presenter paused, awaiting his response to a question he hadn't heard. Continue, Maxwell said smoothly, covering his lapse. I'm interested in the projected growth statistics. Richard shot him a pointed look from across the table. They'd known each other since business school. Richard understood exactly how distracted he was. The meeting crawled on for another hour before Maxwell could reasonably adjourn it. As the board members filtered out, Richard closed the door, leaving them alone. What the hell is going on with you? Richard demanded. You are completely checked out. I told you I found Charlotte and my daughters. So you said, and while that's significant, it doesn't explain throwing away a decade of work. The Westlake acquisition will happen with or without my undivided attention, Maxwell interrupted. The groundwork is laid. The numbers work. This isn't like you, Max, Richard persisted. You don't lose focus. You don't put personal matters ahead of business. Maybe that's precisely the problem, Maxwell replied quietly. Richard studied him. You're serious about this, aren't you? About them? They're my children, Richard. Children you didn't know existed until yesterday. Children whose mother might be... Careful, Maxwell warned, his voice dropping dangerously. Richard sighed. I'm just saying, proceed with caution, verify paternity, protect yourself. The suggestion hit Maxwell like a physical blow. I don't need a DNA test to know they're mine. They have my mother's hair, my eyes, my chin. Then at least let me run a background check on Charlotte, see what she's been up to these past 10 years. She's been raising our daughters while struggling to survive, Maxwell replied coldly. That's what she's been up to. Richard raised his hands in surrender. Fine. Just don't come crying to me when this blows up in your face. After Richard left, Maxwell sat alone in the boardroom, staring out at the Boston skyline. For the first time, the view failed to inspire the usual pride. Instead, he felt hollow, thinking of all he'd sacrificed to reach these heights. His phone chimed with a text from Charlotte. Girls want to know if you're coming for dinner. Something warm unfurled in his chest. 3 simple meals together, and already they expected him, wanted him there. On my way, he replied. At the cottage, he found the girls setting the table, while Charlotte prepared a simple pasta dinner. The domesticity of the scene struck him forcefully. This was what he'd walked away from 10 years ago. Maxwell! Emma spotted him first. Look what we did today! She proudly displayed a drawing of what appeared to be their family, stick figures labelled Mom, Emma, Livy, and surprisingly, Maxwell. That's wonderful, he said, genuinely touched. May I keep it? Emma nodded enthusiastically. I made it for you. Did you finish work? Olivia asked, arranging forks with careful precision. All done, he assured her, though his inbox overflowed with urgent matters. Over dinner, the twins chattered about their upcoming first day at school, their excitement palpable. Charlotte remained quieter, watching Maxwell interact with her daughters. They've never had a man in their lives, she said later, after the twins were asleep. They sat on the cottage porch, the night air cool around them. Never? Maxwell asked, surprised. Charlotte shook her head. I dated occasionally, but no one serious, no one I would introduce to them. She paused. They're getting attached to you. The warning in her voice was clear. I'm not going anywhere, Charlotte. You left before. I was young, selfish, and terrified, he admitted. Success was the only thing that mattered to me then. And now? Maxwell considered the question carefully. Now I realize success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Charlotte scoffed. That's a convenient revelation. But an honest one, he insisted. Finding you again, meeting the girls. It's forced me to confront what I've become. And what's that? A very wealthy, very lonely man who traded real happiness for the illusion of it. Charlotte studied him in the moonlight. Pretty words, Maxwell, but actions matter more. Give me the chance to show you, he urged. Not for us. That bridge is probably burned beyond repair. But for Emma and Olivia. They don't know you're their father, Charlotte reminded him. When will you tell them? She sighed. I don't know. They've asked about their father over the years. I told them he wasn't ready to be a dad. The truth, Maxwell acknowledged with a wince. I never spoke badly of you, she continued. I didn't want them to carry that burden. The revelation humbled him. She'd had every right to vilify him in their eyes, yet she'd chosen not to. Thank you for that, he said softly. It wasn't for you, she clarified. It was for them. The distinction mattered. Everything she'd done had been for their daughters, while everything he'd done had been for himself, until now. I want to set up trust funds for them, he said, for their education, their future. Maxwell, this isn't negotiable, Charlotte. Whether or not I'm actively in their lives, I will provide for them financially. It's the very least I can do. Charlotte was silent for a long moment. You really have changed, haven't you? I'm trying to, he replied honestly. The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Then Charlotte stood. "It's late. The girls have school tomorrow." "I'd like to drive them," Maxwell said, "if that's okay." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. They'd like that. As he walked to his car, Maxwell felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not for business success or financial gain, but for something infinitely more valuable. A second chance at being the man he should have been all along. The elementary school's drop-off line moved with efficient precision as luxury vehicles disgorged the children of Boston's elite. Maxwell's Bentley, usually at home in this wealthy milieu, suddenly felt ostentatious with Emma and Olivia wide-eyed in the back seat. "Everyone here is fancy," Emma whispered, pressing her face against the window. "You belong here just as much as they do," Maxwell assured her, catching Charlotte's grateful glance from the passenger seat. When their turn came, Maxwell stepped out to open the car doors. The twins hesitated, suddenly nervous. "What if they don't like us?" Olivia asked, clutching her new backpack. Maxwell knelt to eye level. "They'll love you. And if anyone isn't nice, you tell me, and I'll handle it." "Promise?" Emma asked. "Promise," Maxwell replied solemnly. Charlotte adjusted their collars. "Remember what we talked about. Be yourselves, be kind, do your best. And we'll pick you up at 3 o'clock, Maxwell added. Charlotte shot him a look. "I can pick them up." "We'll both come," he amended, refusing to be sidelined. The twins hugged them both before racing toward the entrance, their initial nervousness transformed to excitement. Maxwell watched until they disappeared inside, an unexpected ache in his chest. "They'll be fine," Charlotte said, though she looked equally affected. "I know." Maxwell cleared his throat. "Can I drive you somewhere? Job interviews?" "Actually, yes," Charlotte admitted. "I have an interview at Meridian Publishing at 11. "Editorial assistant?" Maxwell guessed, remembering her college major. "Administrative assistant," she corrected. "My English degree doesn't count for much after a decade of sporadic employment." The reminder of her struggles silenced him as they drove back to the cottage. He wanted to offer connections, to make calls that would secure her a position worthy of her intelligence, but he knew such interference would only damage the fragile trust building between them. "I can handle getting to the interview," Charlotte said as they arrived. "You must have work." "Nothing that can't wait," Maxwell replied, though his phone had been buzzing consistently all morning. "Maxwell," she said firmly, "you can't neglect your company. That's not what I want." "What do you want, Charlotte?" he asked quietly. She looked away. "Stability for my daughters, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms." "Our daughters," he corrected gently. Charlotte's eyes flashed. "You haven't earned that yet." The words stung, but he nodded. "Fair enough." After Charlotte left for her interview, Maxwell returned to his office, where crisis awaited. The Westlake deal was teetering, board members were questioning his commitment, and Richard greeted him with barely concealed frustration. "Nice of you to join us," Richard remarked as Maxwell entered the conference room. "Westlake moved up their deadline. If we don't secure financing by Friday, they're going with Archer Global." "Then we'll secure it by Friday," Maxwell replied, slipping back into CEO mode with practiced ease. For the next 4 hours, he immersed himself in work, pushing aside thoughts of Charlotte and the twins. When his alarm chimed at 2:30, however, he stood abruptly. "We need to continue this tomorrow," he announced. Richard stared incredulously. "We're in the middle of school pickup," Maxwell explained, already heading for the door. "You're leaving a billion-dollar negotiation to pick up children," Richard called after him. Maxwell paused. "Yes," he said simply, and left. He arrived at the school just as Charlotte pulled up in a taxi. Their eyes met, mutual surprise giving way to something warmer. "You came," she said. "I promised," he replied. The school doors burst open and children streamed out. The twins spotted them and ran over, talking simultaneously about their day. New friends made, classes they liked, a teacher who complimented Olivia's reading. "And I told everyone my dad is a businessman," Emma announced proudly. The words stopped Maxwell cold. He looked at Charlotte, who appeared equally shocked. "Emma," Charlotte began carefully, "why did you say that?" Emma shrugged. "Everyone was talking about their dads. Abigail's dad is a doctor and Tyler's dad is a lawyer. So I said mine is a businessman." "But honey, you don't—" Charlotte faltered. "Is it because he doesn't live with us?" Emma asked innocently. "Tyler's parents are divorced too. He sees his dad on weekends." The simplicity of her assumption that Maxwell was their father, just one who didn't live with them, left both adults speechless. "Can we get ice cream?" Olivia interjected, oblivious to the tension. "Of course," Maxwell managed, his voice strained. At the ice cream parlor, while the twins debated flavors, Charlotte whispered urgently, "I didn't tell them." "I know," Maxwell assured her, "but they're intelligent. They've clearly been thinking about it." "What do we do?" "Tell them the truth," he suggested, an age-appropriate version. Charlotte bit her lip. "And what is that exactly? That you abandoned us? That you didn't want them?" "That I made the biggest mistake of my life," Maxwell countered, "and I'm trying to make amends." Before Charlotte could respond, Maxwell's phone rang, Richard for the 5th time. He silenced it again. "Your company needs you," Charlotte observed. "They'll survive without me for an afternoon." The twins returned with enormous ice cream cones, and the difficult conversation was postponed. They spent the rest of the afternoon at a nearby park, the girls playing, while the adults watched from a bench, careful distance between them. "I got the job," Charlotte mentioned quietly. "I start Monday." "That's wonderful," Maxwell said sincerely. "It doesn't pay much, but it's a start." Maxwell wanted to tell her she didn't need to work, that he could provide everything, but he understood her need for independence. Instead, he said, "I'm proud of you, Charlotte." She looked surprised. "For what?" "For everything you've done for our daughters, for your strength, your resilience." Charlotte's eyes grew shiny. "I didn't have a choice." "You did," he countered. "You chose to be an extraordinary mother when I chose to be nothing at all." A single tear escaped, which she quickly brushed away. "We should get back. They have homework." That evening, as Maxwell prepared to leave the cottage, Emma approached with a solemn expression. "Are you our dad?" The directness of the question left him breathless. He looked to Charlotte, who had frozen in the kitchen doorway. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" He hedged. "You look like us," Emma said simply. "And you care about us. And you keep looking at Mum like Tyler's dad looks at his mum, even though they're divorced, out of the mouths of babes." Maxwell knelt to her level, conscious that Olivia had also appeared, listening intently. "It's complicated, Emma," he began. "That means yes," Olivia stated matter-of-factly. Charlotte came forward, joining Maxwell. They exchanged a look, reaching silent agreement. "Yes," Charlotte confirmed gently, "Maxwell is your biological father." "I knew it!" Emma exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell us?" Olivia asked, her expression more guarded than her sister's. "Because," Maxwell said carefully, "I haven't been part of your lives until now. I didn't earn the right to be called your father." "Were you in jail?" Emma asked with the bluntness of childhood. Despite everything, Maxwell laughed. "No, nothing like that. I made very poor choices. I hurt your mother deeply. I wasn't ready to be a father." "But you are now," Olivia pressed, her penetrating gaze so like his own. Maxwell felt the weight of the moment, the lives hanging in balance. "I want to be," he answered honestly, "very much if you'll let me." The twins exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations that only twins can have. "Okay," Emma decided for both of them, "but you have to promise not to go away again." "I promise," Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion. As the girls hugged him, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, Maxwell met Charlotte's eyes over their heads. Her expression was complex: caution, hope, lingering hurt, and something new, something like possibility. For the first time in 10 years, Maxwell felt truly alive. "They want to call me Dad," Maxwell said, his voice tight with emotion as he paced Richard's office the following morning. Richard sighed, leaning back in his chair. "And this surprises you because it's so fast. 1 week ago I didn't even know they existed." "Children adapt quickly," Richard observed. "Unlike certain CEOs I know who seem determined to torpedo their companies." Maxwell stopped pacing. "The Westlake deal isn't dead. No thanks to you, I had to personally guarantee our commitment to make the Friday deadline." "And we'll meet it," Maxwell assured him. "How?" "You're barely here. When you are here, you're distracted." Richard's expression softened slightly. "Look, I understand this is significant, life-changing, but you spent a decade building this company. Are you really willing to risk it all?" The question hung between them. Once, the answer would have been unequivocal. Now Maxwell wasn't so sure. "I need to find balance," he said finally. "Balance?" Richard repeated skeptically. "Between being CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation and instant father to 9-year-old twins. Good luck with that." Maxwell's phone chimed with a text from Charlotte. "Girls have school play in 2 weeks. They want to know if you'll come." Something warm unfurled in his chest. Such a normal request. Such an extraordinary gift. "I'll make it work," Maxwell said with renewed determination. "The board meeting is at 4, Richard reminded him. "Try to actually attend this one, would you?" Maxwell nodded distractedly, already heading for the door. "Mom, can we go to Dad's big house?" Emma asked over dinner that evening. The word Dad still sent a jolt through Charlotte each time. A week of knowing the truth, and the twins had embraced it wholeheartedly, while she still struggled with conflicting emotions. "I don't think that's appropriate," she replied carefully. "Why not?" Olivia pressed. "We live on his property already." "That's different," Charlotte explained. "The cottage is separate, independent. But don't you want to see where he lives?" Emma persisted. "I bet it's like a castle." Charlotte forced a smile. "Finish your vegetables, please." Later, after the girls were asleep, Charlotte sat on the porch swing, watching the lights of Maxwell's mansion through the trees. So close, yet worlds apart, just as they had always been. The sound of footsteps on gravel announced his arrival. Maxwell appeared, having changed from his business attire to casual clothes, jeans and a simple sweater that made him look more approachable, more like the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. "The girls want to see the main house," she said without preamble. Maxwell settled beside her on the swing. "I'd love to show them." "I'm not sure it's a good idea." "Why not?" Charlotte struggled to articulate her concerns. "It's too much, too fast. They're already calling you Dad after knowing you for a week." "Does that bother you?" he asked quietly. "Of course it bothers me," she admitted. "I raised them alone for 9 years while you lived in luxury. Now you swoop in with your millions and your mansion, and suddenly you're Dad." The bitterness she'd tried to suppress spilled out. Maxwell didn't flinch from it. "You're right," he acknowledged. "It's not fair. None of this is fair to you." His understanding deflated her anger. "It's not about fair. It's about protecting them." "From me?" "From disappointment," she clarified. "From getting attached to a lifestyle and a father that might not last." Maxwell looked stricken. "I meant what I promised them. I'm not going anywhere." "Intentions change. Priorities shift." Charlotte's voice hardened. "I learned that lesson already. I'm not the same man who left you, Charlotte." "Aren't you? Your friend Richard called 3 times during dinner. Your company still comes first." Maxwell shook his head. "Not anymore." As if on cue, his phone rang. He silenced it without looking. "You can't ignore your responsibilities," Charlotte said. "Sooner or later, you'll have to choose." "I already have," Maxwell insisted. "I've restructured my schedule, delegated more. I'm working from home 3 days a week." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "Richard agreed to that?" "Richard doesn't have a choice. I'm still the CEO." The conviction in his voice gave Charlotte pause. Perhaps he was serious about making changes. "1 month," she said finally. "Let's give it 1 month before the girls see the main house or get too comfortable with all this." She gestured vaguely at the wealth surrounding them. Maxwell nodded, accepting her terms. "And you? What about your comfort level with all this?" Charlotte tensed. "I'm not part of the equation." "You are to me," he said softly. "Daddy, watch me." Emma called, executing a wobbly cartwheel across Maxwell's expansive lawn. 3 weeks had passed since the truth had emerged, and Daddy had replaced Maxwell with a swiftness that still astonished him. "Wonderful," he applauded, glancing at Olivia, who sat cross-legged beside him with a book. The twins, though identical physically, had distinctly different personalities. Emma was outgoing and physical, Olivia thoughtful and introspective. "What are you reading?" he asked Olivia. She showed him the cover. "It's about stars and planets. Did you know that light from some stars takes millions of years to reach us? So we're seeing them how they looked a really long time ago, not how they are now." Maxwell smiled. "Like looking into the past." Olivia nodded solemnly. "Like when Mom looks at old pictures of us when we were babies." The innocent comparison struck Maxwell forcefully. He had no baby pictures, no memories of their first steps or words. The loss felt physical, an ache beneath his ribs. "Dad?" Olivia's voice pulled him back. "Are you sad?" He considered deflecting, then decided on honesty. "A little. I miss so much of your lives." Olivia studied him with those penetrating eyes, so like his own. "Mom said you weren't ready to be a dad then." "That's true. Are you ready now?" The directness of her question deserved equal directness in response. "I'm learning," Maxwell said. "Every day." Olivia seemed to accept this. "Mom says everybody makes mistakes. The important thing is to fix them if you can," out of the mouths of babes. "Your mom is very wise," Maxwell replied. Emma raced over, breathless with exertion. "Can we see inside the big house now?" Mom said after a month. "And it's been a month and 3 days. I've been counting." Maxwell chuckled. "Let me check with your mother first." "She's at work," Emma pointed out. "We could just take a quick peek. She wouldn't even know." "That would be dishonest," Maxwell said firmly. "And we don't keep secrets from your mother." Both girls looked impressed by this stance, and Maxwell realized they were constantly evaluating him, testing boundaries, assessing his character. He was on probation, not just with Charlotte, but with his daughters as well. "How about this?" he suggested. "We'll invite your mom for dinner tonight, at the main house. Then you can all see it together." The twins exchanged one of their telepathic glances. "Deal," they said in unison. Charlotte, when contacted, was hesitant but eventually agreed. Maxwell spent the afternoon with uncharacteristic nervousness, instructing his housekeeper on dinner preparations and straightening rooms that were already immaculate. "You're acting like a teenager before prom," Richard remarked during their video call. "It's important," Maxwell replied simply. Richard sighed. "The Tokyo investors are expecting you next week. Reschedule it." "Again? Max, this is getting ridiculous. You can't run a global corporation remotely forever." "It's not forever," Maxwell insisted, "just until things stabilize." "And when will that be, exactly? These children will need a father for the next decade, minimum." The question hit a nerve. Maxwell had been avoiding thinking too far ahead, focusing instead on daily victories, a laugh shared with the twins, a moment of softening from Charlotte. "I'll figure it out," he said firmly. Charlotte arrived promptly at 6, wearing a simple dress that reminded Maxwell of the woman he'd known a decade ago, confident, vibrant, full of dreams. The twins danced around her, excitement bubbling over. "Thank you for coming," Maxwell greeted her. "The girls have talked of nothing else for days," she replied with a small smile. The grand tour commenced, the twins racing ahead to explore each new room with exclamations of delight. Maxwell watched Charlotte's reactions more carefully, the slight widening of her eyes at the marble foyer, the careful neutrality as they passed priceless artwork. "It's beautiful," she acknowledged in the conservatory, sunlight streaming through glass walls onto exotic plants, "but it doesn't feel like a home." The observation startled him. "What do you mean?" Charlotte gestured around. "Everything's perfect, untouched, like a museum." Maxwell had never considered this perspective. To him, the mansion represented achievement, success, but looking through her eyes, he saw the sterility, the emptiness. "It used to be different," he said quietly, "when my parents were alive." Charlotte's expression softened. "You never talk about them." "They died while we were together, car accident." "I remember," she said. "You shut down afterward, threw yourself into work." The simple observation illuminated so much. His parents' death had triggered his fear of loss, of vulnerability. Business was safer, controllable, predictable. "Mom! Dad, come see this room, it has a piano." Emma's voice echoed down the hallway. They followed the sound to the music room, where the twins were reverently touching the keys of the grand piano. "It was my mother's," Maxwell explained. "She played beautifully." "Can you play?" Olivia asked. Maxwell nodded, sitting on the bench. "A little. She taught me." "I don't understand why you won't just sign the papers," Charlotte said, frustration evident as she stood in Maxwell's home office. 6 months had passed since their reunion. 6 months of gradual trust building, of Maxwell proving his commitment to the twins with unwavering presence and support. Maxwell looked at the trust fund documents on his desk. "Because $2 million each isn't enough." Charlotte's eyes widened. $2 million is more than enough for anyone. "Not for my daughters," Maxwell insisted. $5 million each is more appropriate." "This is exactly what I've been afraid of," Charlotte said, pacing the room. "You're trying to buy their love with extravagance." "I'm trying to secure their future," Maxwell countered. "Education, housing, opportunities, everything I missed giving them for 9 years. Money isn't everything, Maxwell." "Don't you think I know that?" he asked quietly. "But it's something I can give them without question. Something concrete." Charlotte studied him, her expression softening. "You don't need to make up for lost time with money." "Then how?" The question emerged more vulnerable than he intended. "By being present, consistent." Charlotte sat across from him. "By showing up for the science fair and the scraped knees and the nightmares." "The way you have been." Maxwell nodded, absorbing her words. $3 million, he offered as compromise, and college funds, non-negotiable. Charlotte sighed, recognizing his stubbornness. "Fine, but we don't tell them about this until they're adults." "Agreed." As Charlotte signed the papers, Maxwell watched her, the careful precision of her movements, the slight furrow between her brows when she concentrated. In 6 months, they developed a functional co-parenting relationship, but the wall between them remained firmly intact. Charlotte had made it clear that forgiveness didn't equal reconciliation. "The girls want to know if you're coming to Emma's soccer game tomorrow," Charlotte said, completing the signatures. "I wouldn't miss it," Maxwell assured her, "though I might be a few minutes late. Board meeting." Charlotte nodded, accustomed now to his juggling act. Maxwell had restructured his work life dramatically, delegating more, working remotely when possible, prioritizing family events. But the demands of Harrington Enterprises couldn't be completely sidelined. Richard had adapted grudgingly to the new reality, though not without constant reminders of what was at stake. You're walking a tightrope, he'd warned just yesterday. One slip and everything falls. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it wasn't inaccurate either. Maxwell felt the precarious balance daily. Father, CEO, provider, leader. Some days he managed it gracefully. Other days he barely held on. "Earth to Maxwell," Charlotte's voice broke through his thoughts. "Did you hear what I said?" "Sorry," he apologized. "What was that?" "I said Olivia's teacher thinks she should skip 5th grade, go straight to middle school next year." Maxwell smiled with pride. "She's exceptionally bright." "She gets that from you," Charlotte acknowledged, a rare admission. "And Emma, how's she doing academically?" "Average in most subjects. Above average in anything requiring physical coordination or social skills." Maxwell nodded. "They complement each other perfectly." "They always have," Charlotte agreed, her expression softening as it always did when discussing their daughters. "Even as babies." These small glimpses into the years he'd missed were precious to Maxwell, though tinged with regret. "Tell me about when they were born," he requested, not for the first time. Charlotte's initial reluctance to share these memories had gradually eased. "It was a difficult delivery," she recalled. "Emergency C-section at 36 weeks. Emma came out screaming. Olivia was quieter, observing everything with those serious eyes." "Just like now," Maxwell noted. "Some things never change." Charlotte smiled faintly. "Your mother would have adored them." The mention of his mother caught Maxwell by surprise. "You think so?" "I know so. She always wanted granddaughters." The observation opened a fresh wound. His parents had died never knowing they had grandchildren. Another consequence of his selfish choice. "I've been thinking," Maxwell said, changing the subject. "The guest house is getting crowded with the girls growing. Would you consider moving into the main house?" Charlotte stiffened. "No." "Just hear me out," he pressed. "Separate wings, complete independence, but more space for everyone." "That's not independence, Maxwell. That's proximity." "Would that be so terrible?" he asked quietly. Charlotte's expression was unreadable. "It would complicate things. Things are already complicated." She stood, gathering her purse. "The current arrangement works. Let's not change it." At the door, Charlotte paused. "The girls want to go to Disney World for spring break." "I'll arrange everything," Maxwell said immediately. "No, I mean, they want all of us to go together, as a family." The word family hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. "I'd like that very much," Maxwell said carefully. "Maxwell James Harrington, you have exactly 5 seconds to explain yourself before I call security." Eleanor Westlake's voice cut like steel across her expansive office. Maxwell remained standing, refusing the offered chair. "I think my proposal explains itself." "Does it?" Eleanor arched one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Because it looks like you're trying to commit corporate suicide. I prefer to call it strategic restructuring." Eleanor laughed without humor. "Stepping down as CEO of your own company is hardly strategic. It's insanity." "I'm not stepping down completely," Maxwell clarified. "Just transitioning to executive chairman. Richard would take over day-to-day operations as CEO. While you do what exactly? Play house with your instant family?" The barb struck its target, but Maxwell maintained his composure. "Eleanor Westlake hadn't built a pharmaceutical empire by being subtle. While I focus on long-term strategy and major relationships," he corrected, "like our potential merger." Eleanor studied him with shrewd eyes. "The board won't approve this." "They already have," Maxwell replied, "conditionally." "On what condition?" "That you and I finalize our deal today." Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. "So that's your play? Force my hand to save your little domestic arrangement?" Maxwell smiled thinly. "Business is business, Eleanor. You need our distribution network for your new cancer drug. We need your research division. The numbers work. Everything else is just noise. Eleanor leaned back, reassessing him. I underestimated you, Maxwell. I thought you'd gone soft. A common misconception, he replied evenly. One I occasionally encourage. After a lengthy silence, Eleanor pressed her intercom. Send in the lawyers. We're signing today. 4 hours later, Maxwell emerged from Westlake Pharmaceuticals with the signed merger agreement, the largest deal of his career and potentially his last as active CEO. Richard was waiting in the car. Well? Maxwell handed him the documents. Done. Richard skimmed the terms, eyes widening. These are better than our original offer. Eleanor respects decisiveness, Maxwell explained. Once she realized I was serious about the restructuring, she saw an opportunity to negotiate directly with me one last time. So it's really happening? Richard asked, still processing. You're making me CEO. You've earned it, Maxwell said sincerely, and it's time. Richard studied his oldest friend. This is about more than just balancing work and family, isn't it? Maxwell gazed out the window as Boston's financial district slid past. Charlotte and the girls are moving into the main house next month. She agreed. Richard sounded surprised. Not exactly. Maxwell smiled slightly. She said she'd consider it if I could prove I was serious about permanent changes, about putting family first, truly first. And this restructuring is your proof. Part of it, Maxwell acknowledged. You're still in love with her, Richard observed, after all this time. Maxwell didn't confirm or deny. Some truths were too personal, too raw to voice aloud. What if she never feels the same? Richard pressed. What if all these changes are for nothing? They won't be for nothing, Maxwell replied with conviction. The twins need their father, fully present, not constantly divided. That alone justifies everything. Richard sighed. Well, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Finally. Maxwell raised an eyebrow. Finally? Then let's just say I wasn't entirely convinced when you first found them, Richard admitted. I thought it might be temporary, guilt, midlife crisis, something you'd get over. And now? Now I see how they've changed you, for the better. Richard grinned suddenly. And though I reserve the right to call you at all hours when I'm drowning in CEO responsibilities. Noted, Maxwell laughed. At home, Maxwell found Charlotte and the twins in the cottage kitchen preparing dinner together. The domesticity of the scene still struck him with wonder each time he witnessed it. How was your meeting? Charlotte asked, noting his early return. Productive, he replied, deliberately casual. I'll tell you about it later. The twins tackled him with hugs, a ritual that had evolved over the past 8 months and never failed to fill the empty spaces inside him. Dad, guess what? Emma exclaimed. I got the lead in the school play. I don't want to go to Grandma's. Emma's wail echoed through the main house, where they'd been living for nearly 4 months now. Dad, please don't make us. Maxwell knelt to his daughter's level, wiping tears from her freckled cheeks. It's only for the weekend, sweetheart. Your mom needs to visit Grandma Henderson in the hospital. No, but why can't you come too? Olivia asked, more composed than her twin, but equally distressed. Because, Charlotte explained patiently, entering the room with packed overnight bags. Grandma doesn't know about your dad yet. She's been very sick, and I don't want to overwhelm her. The truth was more complicated. Charlotte's mother had never forgiven Maxwell for abandoning her pregnant daughter. Learning he was back in their lives, that they were living in his home, would require careful introduction, not a surprise appearance during a health crisis. You'll have fun with your cousins, Charlotte assured them, and it's just 2 nights. Will you call us? Emma asked Maxwell, bottom lip trembling. Every morning and every night, he promised. After tearful goodbyes and multiple reassurances, Charlotte finally managed to get the twins into the car. Maxwell stood in the driveway, waving until they disappeared down the long drive. The house felt immediately emptier, hollower without their presence. 12 months ago he'd lived here alone, unconscious of the silence. Now it pressed against him, a physical reminder of what his life had been, and what it might return to if he failed to nurture the precious family bonds he'd been given a second chance to build. His phone rang. Richard, predictably. "How's domestic bliss?" Richard asked by way of greeting. "Charlotte and the girls just left for the weekend," Maxwell replied. "Family emergency with her mother." "Perfect timing," Richard said. "The Tokyo team finally agreed to meet in Boston instead of Japan. I've scheduled them for tomorrow morning." Maxwell sighed. "It's Saturday." "Business doesn't recognize weekends, as you well know." Richard paused. "Besides, isn't this why you restructured? So you could handle the big relationships while I deal with day-to-day operations." He had a point. Maxwell had promised the board he would remain active in key partnerships and strategy. "What time?" 9 a.m. Four Seasons. Wear your intimidation suit." Maxwell smiled despite himself. "The charcoal Brioni with the red tie." "That's the one," Richard confirmed. "These guys respect power moves." After ending the call, Maxwell wandered through the quiet house. 4 months of cohabitation had transformed it from showplace to home. Children's artwork adorned refrigerator doors. Textbooks and soccer cleats cluttered hallway benches. The formal living room had been reimagined as a family room, with comfortable seating arranged around a television rather than a priceless sculpture. Charlotte's influence was equally evident. Fresh flowers in simple arrangements, family photos in silver frames, books stacked on bedside tables. She had breathed life into spaces that had been merely perfect before. Their living arrangement worked surprisingly well. Charlotte and the twins occupied the east wing, Maxwell the west. They shared common areas: kitchen, family room, garden. It offered both togetherness and privacy, allowing their unusual family dynamic to evolve naturally. And evolve it had. The twins now moved between parents with ease, sometimes seeking Maxwell for homework help, sometimes Charlotte for comfort. They ate dinner together most evenings, shared weekend activities, attended school functions as a unit. To outsiders, they might appear a normal family. But Maxwell and Charlotte maintained careful boundaries. Their relationship, while increasingly warm and cooperative, remained firmly in co-parenting territory. Maxwell's confession of love hung between them, acknowledged but not addressed. The call came just after 9. Charlotte, her voice tight with stress. "Mom's taken a turn for the worse. They're moving her to intensive care." "I'm so sorry," Maxwell said sincerely. "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually, yes." She hesitated. "The girls are upset. They've never seen Grandma this sick. My sister's house is chaotic with her own kids, and Emma's having anxiety. They're asking for you." Maxwell didn't hesitate. "Text me the address. I'll be there in an hour." "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "They need me." A pause, then. "I need you too." The simple admission, offered in a moment of vulnerability, touched Maxwell deeply. "I'm on my way." The Tokyo meeting would have to be rescheduled. Again, Richard would understand. Eventually. "Happy birthday, dear Emma and Olivia. Happy birthday to you." The assembled crowd cheered as the twins blew out the candles on their elaborate 10th birthday cake. A confection featuring musical notes for Olivia, now taking piano lessons on Maxwell's mother's piano, and a soccer ball for Emma, whose team had won the regional championship. Maxwell caught Charlotte's eye across the garden, where their daughters were now accepting gifts from friends and extended family. Her smile, unguarded, joyful, warmed him from within. 14 months had transformed all their lives. The twins thrived in their new stability, excelling in school and activities. Charlotte had been promoted at the publishing house, her natural talent finally recognized. And Maxwell had found balance he'd never thought possible, meaningful work combined with the profound joy of fatherhood. "Quite a party," Richard commented, appearing beside him with champagne flute in hand. Hard to believe these are the same kids who were homeless a year ago. They're resilient, Maxwell replied, watching as Olivia carefully opened a present while Emma tore into hers with characteristic enthusiasm. They take after their mother, Richard observed. Speaking of whom? Maxwell followed his friend's gaze to where Charlotte now chatted with Melissa and, surprisingly, Eleanor Westlake, who had become an unexpected ally after the merger. Have you asked her yet? Richard pressed. Maxwell shook his head. Not the right time. There's never a right time for these things, Richard advised. You just have to take the leap. Before Maxwell could respond, Emma raced over, brandishing a jewelry box. Dad, look what Mom got me! Inside nestled a delicate silver bracelet with a soccer ball charm. It's beautiful, Maxwell admired. Just like you. Emma beamed, then spotted Richard. Uncle Richard, did you bring presents? Richard's initial discomfort with the twins had gradually transformed into genuine affection. Don't I always, Squirt? He replied, producing 2 identical envelopes from his jacket. Savings bonds? Maxwell guessed wryly. Someone has to think practically around here, Richard defended, winking at Emma. But there might be tickets to that concert they've been talking about too. Emma squealed and ran to find her sister. Richard's contribution clutched tightly. Uncle Richard? Maxwell teased once she'd gone. Shut up, Richard muttered, but his expression remained fond. They grow on you. The party continued as afternoon stretched into evening. Friends departed, family lingered. Maxwell's house, their house now, filled with the comfortable noise of people who belonged together. After the twins had opened their final gifts, matching iPads from Maxwell, despite Charlotte's initial objections about extravagance, Charlotte announced bedtime. But Mom, Emma protested, it's our birthday. And you've had a full day of celebration, Charlotte countered. School tomorrow. Listen to your mother, Maxwell supported, receiving a grateful glance from Charlotte. Can Dad tuck us in? Olivia requested. Of course, Charlotte agreed easily. Later, after stories and goodnight kisses, Maxwell found Charlotte alone on the terrace, gazing at stars appearing in the twilight sky. They're finally asleep, he reported, joining her at the stone balustrade. Too much excitement, Charlotte smiled. Thank you for the party. It was perfect. They deserve perfect, Maxwell replied simply. They stood in companionable silence, shoulders nearly touching. 14 months had healed much between them. Trust rebuilt through consistent action, respect earned through co-parenting challenges, friendship forged in the crucible of family life. But something remained unresolved. The deeper current that had always flowed beneath their relationship, acknowledged that night on the cottage porch, but never since addressed. Charlotte, Maxwell began carefully, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. She turned to him, expression curious but guarded. Yes. Maxwell reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Charlotte's eyes widened. This isn't what you think, he clarified quickly. Not exactly. He opened the box, revealing not an engagement ring, but a simple silver key. A key? Charlotte looked confused. To a house, Maxwell explained, on Marlborough Street. 3 bedrooms, garden, walking distance to the girls' school. He paused. In your name only. Understanding dawned in Charlotte's eyes. You bought me a house? I bought you independence, Maxwell corrected gently. The choice to stay or go on your terms. No financial entanglements, no obligations. Charlotte stared at the key, emotions warring across her expressive face. Why? Because true choice requires viable options, Maxwell replied. For 14 months, necessity has kept you here. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you have to.